Good morning on this Sunday, December 22nd, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. A shocking turn of events in the Fulton County 2020 election interference case as the Georgia Court of Appeals removes District Attorney Fani Willis from the case. Also, despite all of the controversies and protests, construction crews are putting the finishing touches on the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. And for the first time in more than a decade, Southwest Georgia farmers will be allowed to drill new water wells. Kathy, Phil, Theron, and Brian are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
A major development in the Fulton County election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump. The state appeals court has removed Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis from the case. This was a bombshell ruling, and it will have big implications for the future of the case against the president-elect and several others. For months, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis publicly and defiantly said there was nothing improper with her personal relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, whom she hired to handle the election interference case against President-elect Donald Trump and others.
It is a lie. It is a lie.
Attorneys for Mr. Trump and others argued Willis improperly benefited from her romance with Wade. In March, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee ruled the relationship between Willis and Wade was a tremendous lapse in judgment, but said she could continue to prosecute the case if Wade resigned, which he did. But Thursday, the Georgia Court of Appeals disagreed and disqualified her. Willis's office says it plans to appeal the ruling to the state Supreme Court. Theron, to you first this week. This was a bombshell for sure.
It was. And look, we go back to where we were when this all came about. You had Georgia really in a posture where folks were receiving calls. We don't need to revisit all these sort of lies and false narratives that the Republicans were sort of spreading about how the election was stolen. Fast forward to where the district attorney comes in. She methodically waited and gathered a lot of evidence, and really, quite frankly, were praised by the legal community for taking her time and presenting a case where we saw 19 co-defendants come up. However, look, the president-elect won the election, and the Court of Appeals were, I think, in a sort of legal sort of tough position, but also in a political tough position, right? And lastly, I think that while this case now has been taken away from District Attorney Fani Willis, the good thing is that the case will go on, and that these co-defendants will have an opportunity to present their case, but also we still have a process to look at how democracy was challenged. And there were a group of people who literally tried to overturn democracy, tried to actually overturn the election results. And while she's not going to be over the case, I do think that the people of Georgia will continue to hear more evidence in these proceedings as they move forward. And they are going to appeal. And they made some very, very good points about how there was some legality, some motions in there, some things that in the motion from the Trump lawyers that basically were not legally sustainable. So you have to just wait and see how good their appeal is going to be.
Phil, as Theron mentioned, the ruling does not dismiss the indictment, right, which means that the prosecuting attorney's counsel will need to find another prosecutor to take over the case, and that prosecutor will then be able to decide if the case will go further. But we're talking 4 years from now? I mean, do we have, a statute of limitations? I mean, how does this play out?
Well, I think it's going to play out because there's a roadmap here, and that's because Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones was originally charged and targeted unfairly by Fani Willis. And what did the Prosecuting Attorney's Council of Georgia decide? There was, quote, no crime committed, unquote. So you can question what they call election interference. And I might want to just mention to our viewers, there's no crime in the federal or state code for the words election interference. It's both sides use this words all the time. The media loves to talk about it. Now, yes, there's fraud. There's all these other crimes that are related to elections. But the big picture here, Theron, is the Court of Appeals did the right thing because there was a horrible appearance of impropriety. And that's where Judge McAfee, who the original trial court judge, got it wrong. And the majority opinion of the Court of Appeals really slapped him down and said this could have been stopped in the first trial, but it wasn't. And there was the lies that were told by Fani Willis. The stories were never straight between Nathan Wade and Fani Willis. There was the improprieties in the courtroom. There was the weak RICO case, which you've heard me say on this show for about a year now. Both prominent Democrat and Republican attorneys said this is the wrong thing to do. It was a waste of taxpayers' money. I could go on and on.
Kathy,
Yes, I'm sure you will.
The state will appeal to the state Supreme Court. What do you think the chances are that the state Supreme Court takes this up?
You know, I couldn't tell you. I mean, right now it's not going in Willis's way right now. I remember some months ago Brian said it was an unforced error, and it always, you know, every time something happens, that phrase just like pops in my mind. I do remember you, and listen, Brian. But let me just say this. You know, ultimately this case has to be heard. All of these people, you know, have charges filed against them. 4 people pled guilty to charges in order to sort of mitigate the charges against them. And I think that what we have to do is see this through to the end. So I hope, regardless of what happens to Willis in this conversation, that you know, that someone steps in, that we hear it, we dispense of these cases one by one, or nobody's going to feel good about it.
Brian?
They did plead guilty, but to misdemeanors, and this is something that's supposed to be this blockbuster case with all these felony convictions of people who tried to overturn democracy. Is overturning democracy, if that's really what they did, is that a misdemeanor? I mean, that seems like that's a much bigger deal. I think what really happened here is that none of these guys, particularly those who were alternative electors, didn't break the law. I don't have anything to add to the spot news this week that Phil didn't say. He's dead on right. The appeals court made the right decision. The Supreme Court is going to be very hesitant to take this on. They don't want this hot potato.
They have to agree to
They have to agree. They can just let the appeals court decision stand. And so if I'm them, that's what I would want to do. No one wants to take on a case with the sitting president of the United States, which also presents some legal problems about prosecuting somebody who was in the Oval Office. At the end of the day, though, I want to keep it very simple. Fani Willis should never have brought the case to begin with. It was always overreach. It was always a stretch that what these people did was a crime. The Prosecuting Attorney Council has now backed up what I have said about this all along. If Burt Jones did not commit a crime, none of the rest of them did either. And so it's now in the hands of the people who made that statement. This is going to come to an end, a glorious end for Fani, an ignominious end, and she has had one terrible week in a terrible year.
Oh, Theron, I've got to give you time to respond to that.
Well, question, this is kind of a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask, you know, who appoints the state appeal court judges? Right?
Well, they're elected, but the governor does put them on usually.
Got it.
So what?
So my point is, and I believe that these judges, these women and men, did what they thought based on the law, right? But to criticize Scott McAfee, I think is a little too far. The prosecutors, to me, presented a really good case of why this should go on, which is why I think Judge McAfee allowed her to stay on the case. The fact of the matter is that there's politics in this, right? Had Donald Trump not become president-elect, I think that this case would have gone on. I mean, I truly believe that. But once you have the election of president-elect, it's just the optics of a sitting president, which, you know, we know federally has granted immunity, but these are still state charges that go on. But look, I think to say that it's a glorious outcome, the fact still remains is that we had people who literally tried to spread lies and a false narrative about democracy and our voting. I mean, that happened. And these people pled guilty. Hold on, let me finish.
Okay.
And there were real charges brought up against these folks. And in this case, it's not over. Now, whether it's 4 years, 2 years, to still be said. But I think that ultimately Georgia was put on the national map as an embarrassment about how folks handled the election outcome in Georgia.
So let me ask you this, Theron. Politically, because it's a political talk show, politically, did this backfire on Democrats? You know, the mugshot, right? The court cases.
Lawfare.
Look, there was a sector of people out there that believed that the mugshot, let's just go there, that it probably motivated Trump's base more than we thought it did. However, the fact of the matter is that that's just the process. That's the law. I mean, if you're indicted, you have to come. Everyone else did it, so President Trump did it as well. I do think politically, look, Fani Willis was reelected in this county with an overwhelming majority. So the question is, how does this affect her political career? And I think we have to wait and see what's in the appeal to figure out what her office looks like and the credibility going forward. I know my good friend Phil is about to talk about other cases that have not gone well with the district attorney's office, but I do think that office has done some good in this community by putting bad people in jail.
Phil, I'll give you the final word, because this was not a glorious outcome, because they did not,
Right.
not
It was
yet,
not a
maybe
glorious
for you,
outcome.
but they did not dismiss the whole case.
No,
They could have.
that's right. But as Brian and I were explaining, the state Supreme Court could just refuse to hear this, and it'll go away. And as we point out, I think the prosecuting counsel of Georgia, Attorney's Council of Georgia, has set the roadmap up. I think the overall thought is lawfare. I think politically it backfired on the Democrats. You should not have prosecutors targeting, I'm going to get Trump. That's what she said. She had the grand jury that was targeted to get Trump. They had this trumped up stuff about he violated the anti-racketeering law. There was no evidence that ever happened. In fact, no one was ever charged, as I say, with any crime. So I think that it backfired nationally, let alone in Georgia.
Let me just say really quickly, I hope when we get into the next year and Trump's new cabinet people get put in, that when we start having a conversation about who's going after who for political reasons, that we have this conversation again.
Well, the Pandora's box may be opened, and I would hope Republicans wouldn't stoop to this level. But it probably will happen.
And we will be discussing. Up next, we get a first look at the new and controversial Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility. Next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
After years of anticipation and controversies, we finally have our first look at the Atlanta Public Safety Training Center. The Public Safety Training Facility includes resources for Atlanta police and fire they've never had, including a 6-story state-of-the-art rescue tower and a simulation area which allows officers to replicate crises like a school shooting or a barricaded gunman. You also saw expanded horse stables. Kathy, the facility isn't open just yet, but it will be soon.
It will be, and let me just say from the outset, Atlanta has needed a new public safety training facility forever. They used to have an old elementary school at the end of one of the runways down at Hartsfield.
They had mold and
it was
water.
Dreadful.
Yes.
So this is a long time coming. But I think Atlanta's leaders, the mayor, city council, corporate leaders have to really understand that damage was done to sort of citizen confidence in the processes that we go through when people are promised parkland or transit on the Beltline or other kinds of things, and people go through years of charrettes and all these kinds of things, only to have corporate leadership just decide, hey, we're going to do something different. We're going to use that land for this. And that is starting to resonate. I think it's going to play into next year's elections in Atlanta. But we should take the time to celebrate that finally our public safety officers get a training center that's worthy of them.
Brian?
Absolutely, this has been needed for a long time. What do we say every time there is a officer-involved shooting, particularly when it leads to a fatality? We need better training for our police officers, anybody who's a frontline law enforcement person. I totally agree. This is how we do it. This is the model that we need to follow. We need to make sure that these guys go into the field, guys and gals, go into the field with the latest information, the latest education, and the latest training. This is going to make the community safer. And this did go through the process. I hear you. Some people didn't get the outcome that they wanted. That's how politics works. But there were open hearings. Everyone's voice was heard. There were votes taken by the people's elected representatives. And they chose to do this. That is how the system worked. And I'm glad we're past all the violence that we saw from the tree terrorist and all that. This is going to be something that's great for the community moving forward. I'm glad that many state Republicans, even though this is a local issue, stepped forward into the breach here and said, no, this is happening. We need this. Our communities need this.
All right. Moving on. This week, Georgia's Republican electors gathered at the state capitol to cast ballots for the Republican Party ticket, celebrating Trump's re-election. Phil, this was a much different scene compared to 4 years ago.
It was, because as we all know, 4 years ago, both sides had slates of electors. The Republicans were heavily criticized because, oh no, you can't do that. That was the mantra in the mainstream media and from the Democrats. However, there was precedent, as we know. Just very quickly, the Republicans said, no, we did this because of an ongoing lawsuit. And Hawaii was the precedent because the Democrats also did their electors back in 1960, and so they say they didn't commit a crime. So yeah, what a difference! And the Republicans are happy, and now the Democrats are upset.
Well, what a different 4 years make. And then, Democrats, yeah, we're upset, but we're also motivated to go out and win some elections again. But, Lori, let's just set the scene for our viewers. I mean, you saw Democrats 4 years ago going down peacefully. saying, hey, we're going to vote for the next president of the United States. And then we saw some Republicans, not all, some Republicans have what I call an unconstitutional temper tantrum and basically, undermine the faith in the elections and democracy. So I applaud these Republican electors for doing it the right way. It's a transition of power. And I think that, I want to push back on Phil a little bit that Democrats are not being disruptive. You don't see us running down there making all these claims. But, look, the president-elect won this election. He won Georgia, and these electors did the right thing. But I just want us to always be reminded that the other side, in most cases, they have an opportunity to make sure that they follow democracy. And I applaud the Democrats for doing that on this turn.
Well, President-elect Trump tapped another 2 Georgians for positions. Herschel Walker for ambassador to the Bahamas, and former Buckhead City supporter Bill White for ambassador to Belgium. Brian?
I'm so glad to see Herschel Walker here. What a great month for him. He got his degree from the University of Georgia. Now he has been nominated for an ambassadorship. One that, by the way, seems kind of fun, right?
Kind of cushy.
Yeah, it seems like a nice gig.
Who wouldn't want the Bahamas?
Yeah, it's a short airplane ride, lots of beaches. So congratulations to him. For Bill White, I will say one thing that I'm going to be watching, Theron and I talked about this, Belgium has a huge north-south divide with a more prosperous north and a less prosperous south. Let's see if he's going to be pushing a secession movement there in Belgium as part of this appointment.
The fight over chocolate?
I got to
Kathy?
say something. Listen, I have got a good friend in Belgium, and I had to send her a note and say, I'm so sorry. Hang on. Here's some mess coming to you. So I sort of hope that one gets held up so we don't just spread this nastiness into other countries.
Phil?
Well, you're making a good point, because we've had a lot of problems with ambassadorial nominations that have to be ratified by the U.S. Senate being held up. And you remember Calvin Smyre, the Democrat, he got held up. You remember Mark Burkhalter, the Republican, he got held up. They're used by both parties. They're used by both parties is kind of to hurt each one another into horse trade and block things. So I hope they get confirmed.
Well, I was going to mention that, look, and I'm glad you brought up the Dean, Calvin Smyre, because this was a man who was nominated in 2021 and ultimately rated a long time, 4 years, to eventually this just die. And so, look, I'm glad that the Trump-elect administration finally rewarded a brother, a black person who has actually been a friend of Donald Trump for a very long time. Correct me if I'm wrong, B. Rob and Phil. I think this is, as we tape, the only person of color, black, that has been nominated by this president-elect.
Oh, there's more.
Well, more to come, but as we tape, this is it. So the thing about it is, look, Bill White, I think that, look, Bill White will go down in history in Atlanta as being one of the most divisive, disruptive figures we've ever seen. And so I'm glad he's out of Atlanta. I wish him well. I've never been to Belgium, Kathy. Maybe one day you and I can go visit your friend. But I do think that, again, I think about Calvin Smyre and how this man, who had 45 years of public service, who got held up for some reasons, and the fact that you see what happens with Herschel, who I think has some issues as well.
All right, coming up, for the first time in more than a decade, Southwest Georgia farmers are allowed to drill new water wells. We'll discuss after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Georgia will allow some farmers in the southwest part of the state to drill new irrigation wells into the Florida aquifer. The state will begin accepting those applications on April 1st. Now, the announcement comes after Georgia won multiple legal battles over its use of water in the Flint River. Kathy, this is a big win for Georgia farmers.
It is, and they need a win. It's been tough since the hurricane, and I think everybody, if you're not paying attention to what's happening to Georgia farmers, you're not paying attention to what's happening in Georgia, because it really affects so much of what happens in our state. So I think this is a good one. I think even environmental groups have come out and said, it's time to move forward on this. I think what we have to be careful about is to just make sure that we're monitoring the health of that aquifer all the time. Fast movements have to happen when we start seeing it get emptied out.
Phil.
Well, I agree with some of the points you're making. This has been going on, these water wars, for about 15 years or so, and Florida's been trying to push us around and rip us off, and so I think this is a fair, balanced thing to have happen. In fact, there is a requirement that if there is a drought in Florida, that this can be capped. So, and there are some environmental concerns that were done, but yeah, agriculture needed this.
Darren?
The one thing that I'm proud of is that if you look at that, you have the state conservationists and farmers all on the same page about a very important issue, not just to farmers, who I believe these women and men who play a central part in our economy, but more importantly, like, this is something that the state has been battling for a long time. So as we go into this new phase, with climate change being real, I mean, you look at this week just alone. On Tuesday, I'm in a short sleeve shirt playing golf. On Friday morning, we're all coming in here bundled up with our scullies on. So I think that, the fact that the state has moved forward, the farmers are actually being able to get the support that they need. That's true. We walked in with scullies on this morning. Yeah.
Scullies, okay.
Bill had a great scully when we all got here. So I was very involved in the water wars as Governor Jill's spokesperson. I was in the office when Florida filed this lawsuit more than a decade ago. And what really frustrated me and then Governor Jill was that Governor Jill was making every effort to create a deal between the two states on the political side, between the people's elected representatives, not in courts. The Florida folks didn't operate in good faith. They met with Governor Jill and then filed the lawsuit the next day without even telling him. So there was some rage on our side. And so to see us win time and time again because Florida wouldn't do it the smart way, it has cost us tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars fighting these stupid lawsuits. So Florida, eat it, because you ain't gonna be drinking it.
Oh.
You practiced that one in the mirror.
I just thought of that just now.
You even looked in that camera.
We just thought about it. That was impulsive.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
What's he trying to say?
Eat it. Ooh, that was
Eat it.
All right, Georgia Congressman David Scott will no longer be the ranking member of the House Agriculture Committee after a shuffling of Democratic leadership positions on Capitol Hill. Theron.
Congressman David Scott has been representing, public service in the state for a long time. I mean, serving in the Georgia legislature and serving in Congress. And look, he had once was the chair of the Agriculture Committee. And so I want to applaud Congressman Scott for doing something that many elected officials, particularly Republicans and Democrats, would not do. And that is to step aside to basically allow a group of new leaders to emerge. But let's not take away the impact that this congressman had. He has a great deal of knowledge around agriculture issues in the state. He worked in a bipartisan way to bring a lot to farmers and agriculture to grow business here. But this was a good move on his part, and we'll see what happens. But he'll still be involved in the committee, but to step aside as a ranking member, I think is honorable, and he should be commended for it.
Phil.
Well, I agree. He did a lot for agriculture. We're talking about agriculture here for a few minutes. He looked out for us. We're going to miss him, but he'll still be a voice. He worked very well, as you point out, with Sanford Bishop and some of the Republican congressmen, Drew Ferguson, I know, Austin Scott, think the world of him. They worked together on the Farm Bill, which you have to do, and so he'll be missed as chairman.
I think it's safe to say he's a winner in our book.
Yes.
Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
My winner this week, if you need to go see Santa, there's still time. There's no better place than Phipps Plaza. Santa at Phipps, Mrs. Claus, Steve, the rest of the elves are just the best. We've made it a tradition in our family for the past 17 years, so I encourage you to visit Santa at Phipps. All right, Kathy.
Well, I hate to do winners and losers right here before Christmas, but one of the things I want to say is December 25th is both the start of Hanukkah and Christmas Day. So I just want to say Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas to everybody.
Oh, that's good.
My losers, yet again, Georgia Power and Public Service Commission for raising rates on people again. Merry Christmas, y'all. It's another 3.5% on your bill. More to come.
All right, Phil.
I detect bitterness, but
I'm
anyhow.
bitter. I'm bitter.
It's inflation.
My winner is Donald Trump, as we discussed earlier in the show, and Fani Willis, the DA of Fulton County, is the loser. She lost that big case there. And yes, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to everybody. It's a very sacred season for Christians.
All right, Darren.
Also, Happy Kwanzaa, and definitely Merry Christmas and Hanukkah and all that. But also, I want to shout out Invest Atlanta this week, Lori. They actually announced a little over $8 million in incentives to bring 2 new grocery stores in South Atlanta. We know that we need grocery stores all across the city of Atlanta, but there are some food deserts. Also, Calvin Smyre, we mentioned him earlier. They named a intersection of I-185 and Macon Road was named after state representative Calvin Smyre. It's called the Calvin Smyre Exchange. And then lastly, my Falcons. All right, you know, we went out to Vegas. We got this win. I'm sorry, Kirko. You know, I think it was kind of the right decision to bench him going forward. But Michael Penix Jr. is going to have an amazing opportunity now to come and take this franchise. My prediction is Tampa will lose a game, and the Falcons will win the NFC South. And then lastly, shout out to Will Chandler, who is the son of Beth Chandler. He actually shot an amazing score this past week, and he got his PGA Tour card. So amazing, Georgia. I think it was in the 60s, but wish him well on the PGA Tour.
Oh, that's awesome, and that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Well,
Ryan.
Kathy, I am so grateful here in Georgia for the resilient, low-cost energy that I enjoy every day at my house. My winner
It's not
is
low cost, but it might be
Below the
resilient.
national average.
below national average, right?
Gotta say the grid. Say the grid.
My winner is Congressman Buddy Carter, who was named the Healthcare Subcommittee Chair for Energy and Commerce this week. That's a huge position. He's the first Georgian to hold it since my old boss, Nathan Deal, who was there trying to fight Obamacare back in the day. And to new Congressman-elect Brian Jack, I was able to spend some time with him this week. He is the steering committee member for the freshman class. He got more freshmen into A committees, including 4 on energy and commerce. It is something we haven't seen in more than 2 decades, the numbers that he delivered there. So he is also was down in Mar-a-Lago this week meeting with the president. So he's going to be a huge asset for Georgia during these next 4 years.
All right, we'll be watching. All right, everybody. Well, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to
Happy
everybody.
Hanukkah. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Thank you all
Christmas.
so much for a wonderful year. We will see you again next week. Make it a great one.